Okay, well, this is a short review of Lady Bird, which I just saw the other night. It's a new film by Greta Gerwig. Is it Gerwig or Gerwig? I feel like a lot of RW words become R, like, the name Warwick. It's not Warwick. The place, Berwick, spelt Berwick. We'll go with Gerwig. Anyway, written and directed by her. The first thing she's directed. I think she's written some things before, like Frances Ha, I think she co-wrote and starred in, of course. The film stars another name that's easy to pronounce, Saoirse Ronan. Lady Bird effectively captures a bright, ambitious teen's yearning for greener grass as she approaches high school graduation. Greta Gerwig, in, as I say, her directorial debut, seems to be already deft at crafting relationships, characters, and a real sense of time and place, efficiently and convincingly. Very quickly in watching this movie, I felt I had a pretty strong sense of Lady Bird's position in life and sympathised with her conflicts at home and at school. She loves her mother, she loves her best friend, but approaching adulthood, she wants more. So she considers new crowds, new boyfriends, and a new life at a distant college. This age, stage, and the tension between her ambitions and her limitations are depicted with a clarity and a specificity that suggest personal experience. Gerwig did grow up in this area and moved to New York to attend a liberal arts college. So, there's a suspicion that this is at least in part based in reality for her. Saoirse Ronan's performance as the titular Lady Bird is strong and subtle, depicting with charm the different shades of a character who is bold and charismatic, but also at times eccentric and uncertain. Overall in this film, the comedy was funny, and the dramatic themes were generally well handled. So overall, I really liked it. But let's move on to the couple of things that weren't perfect for me. Lady Bird is cute and quirky throughout, generally in just the right way. Only once or twice does it overstep into too cute. For example, the cool kids are just a bit too cool. The dorky friends are just a bit too dorky. Marion, Lady Bird's mum, is a bit too harsh, a bit too rough. This provides comedy, and it allows for quick and easy relatability to these character types, but it makes their influence on the plot feel less impactful, less surprising, and less real. The cool kids are so aloof that when they blow off prom and disregard Lady Bird's plans for it, we aren't surprised. Then when Lady Bird goes back to her nicer, dorkier friend, we aren't surprised. Marion's harshness with Lady Bird is effective in justifying Lady Bird's desire for independence, but it's never really enriched by an explanation or by delving far into Marion's own perspective. So, these secondary characters are entertaining, but they impact the plot in ways that feel somehow simple or manufactured. So they feel somewhat simple and manufactured rather than kind of natural, nuanced, more subtle secondary characters I'd hope for. Now, I mentioned this kind of pattern of Lady Bird being drawn to new people, but then going back to the familiar and the original. This push and pull pattern is repeated throughout Lady Bird's plot. Lady Bird pushes away from the safe, loving, and familiar things in her life, her mother, her primary friendships, her hometown, for something grander and cooler. A faraway college, the cool kids at school, the dream of New York, only to be pulled back. This pattern is a believable manifestation of the tension within a teen who both loves her home but is also ambitious and frustrated by its limitations. This central tension is an engaging and interesting one. Unfortunately, it's handled a little clunkily at points for me. If the cool kids were more subtly depicted, or the original best friend not quite so dorky and innocent, or her mother's harshness to Lady Bird better contextualized or grounded in character detail or perspective, as I say, the film's later plot turns would have felt a bit less telegraphed, formulaic, and a bit more powerful. And this formula, this kind of toing and froing or pushing and pulling, doesn't just play out in the shorter stories throughout Lady Bird, but also the overarching one. Lady Bird both loves and hates her mother and her town, so she yearns to move onwards and upwards away from them. But when she gets to college, she feels an apologetic, nostalgic pullback in much the same way. In the final scene, as in her emotional return in later scenes to Danny and to Julie, we again see Lady Bird drawn back to that which is homely as she wanders into a church and then leaves a long phone message for her mother. Because we'd already seen this pattern play out in the shorter stories, and we know this is the conflict and the tension within Lady Bird, when it plays out again in this final scene, it's fine. It's makes sense for the character, but we really knew it was coming, so it was unsurprising and for me uninteresting. And so this final scene didn't really land for me, or landed with little impact. Just as some of the characters seem to have been simplified for the sake of storytelling mechanics, too cool, too cute, too harsh, so too are some of the quirky moments and characters a bit too quirky at times. The comedy sometimes oversteps into silliness, detracting from the otherwise realistic depiction of the high school experience. For example, the football coach trying to direct a theatre production in sports coaching terms is funny. I laughed, but it's not believable. Or at least it detracts from the otherwise pretty realistic slice of life sense you have of a high school experience. Cool Kyle's rejection of phones, big business and economics is funny, but makes him such a caricature that he's less interesting when it comes to being a figure of genuine allure for Lady Bird. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I feel like I've spoken more about the little issues I had with it, but overall, I really liked it. It just felt a little caught between its two genres, drama, comedy. The comedy was generally funny, and the drama was generally effective and touching. But in their combination, somehow, each at times undermined the other. The simplification of secondary characters for the sake of comedy impeded the greater story's depth and left me feeling a bit like Lady Bird does about Sacramento. There's a lot of good stuff here, and I had a really nice time, but it's ultimately a bit lacking in ambition and depth. But as a brief, short, somewhat shallow experience, it's really good, really well crafted, really well performed. And I really enjoyed it. So overall, 3.5 out of 5. All right, now for similar movies, either in terms of genre or themes or performances. Similar but better, I think. Movies that this reminded me of, but that I think are slightly better. I mentioned Frances Ha, the 2012 film starring Greta Gerwig and co-written by Gerwig and also Noah Baumbach. Frances Ha's focused on a protagonist struggling with similar issues to Lady Bird, similar issues of finding her authentic self and career, although a bit later in her life, 20s. The Squid and the Whale, 2005 film directed by Noah Baumbach again. Like Lady Bird, this is a somewhat autobiographical coming-of-age movie about the difficulties of navigating one's teenage years under the tension of troubled parents. Ghost World, 2001 film by Terry Zwigoff. It's also a kind of coming-of-age comedy drama based on the Daniel Clowes graphic novel. It follows a young woman played by Thora Birch who, after graduating high school, is drawn to a different crowd, in this case an older man, Steve Buscemi, despite its impact on what was her most important relationship with her best friend, played by Scarlett Johansson. Dazed and Confused, one of my favourite movies from 1993. Dazed deals largely with a male perspective, so that makes it quite different from Lady Bird, but it also captures the high school experience and it captures a particular time and place. In the case of Dazed, 1970s high school students from... it also does a good job of capturing a few different cliques and social groups and age groups. Take Care of My Cat, 2001 Korean film that follows a group of friends as they graduate high school and manage the difficulties of maintaining a connection to past friends while moving on to adult, working, independent life. The 400 Blows, Truffaut's 1959 movie, is an artful exploration of the confusion and the tension generated by a child's creative, rebellious urges and under the restrictive social forces of school and family. Now, this is the most serious movie on this list and probably the most dissimilar to Lady Bird in that in tone and style it's more, it's part of that French New Wave, so it's art house. So it's perhaps the most different from Lady Bird, but it's also got some similar themes and it's really good.